If white opens the game with e4, and black replies with the classical e5, both sides fighting for a fair share of the center, white can play knight f3, developing a piece and attacking the e5 pawn, when black can respond in kind with knight c6, developing a piece and supporting the center. White can steer the game into the Italian opening with bishop c4, developing the bishop to an active diagonal, pointing at black's sensitive f7 pawn. Black has an important decision to make. The straightforward bishop c5 is the most common reply, entering classical lines of the Italian game, the subject of another video, which is a great place to start if you're just learning the basics of this opening. If black wants to sharpen the game immediately, then the other important main line is knight f6, turning the game into the counter-attacking two knights defense. Black sensibly develops a piece and attacks the e4 pawn. Depending on how white responds, we may see anything between a quiet, maneuvering game to a razor-sharp struggle in which a single tempo may decide the fate of the game. The most solid response is the straightforward d3, defending the center and opening up a path for the dark-squared bishop. Bishop c5 is black's most natural response, transposing into classical Italian lines. If black wants to avoid entering these classical lines, developing the bishop to the less active e7 square can be explored. Instead of playing d3, another straightforward but less attractive option is the natural knight c3, inviting black to enter a symmetrical position after bishop c5, a perfectly solid choice. If black wants to remain true to the counterattacking spirit of the two knights' defense, we can see the so-called center knight fork trick with knight takes e4. Preparing to meet white's best response, knight takes e4, with d5, taking over the center while forking white's knight and bishop, ensuring black will regain material with a comfortable game. Sometimes players are discouraged from playing the center knight fork trick because rather than playing knight takes e4, white can play the disruptive bishop takes f7 check, provoking black's king to enter the action with king takes f7. White reclaims the material with knight takes e4. Knight g5 check may look a bit scary, but this is not a move to fear. Black should not waste time with h6, giving white an important tempo to strike in the center with d4, or possibly explore the dangerous sacrifice knight takes e5 check, preparing to assault the enemy king with queen h5. The whole point behind the center knight fork trick can be found in the beginning of its name, the center. Black should boldly claim more space in the center with d5, gaining a tempo against the knight, inviting the dangerous-looking but ultimately harmless check, knight e to g5. The king calmly retreats to the g8 square. The position of black's king may feel uncomfortable, but white's premature aggression is coming to an end. There's no clear way to build an attack, and black is ready to play h6, forcing the knight to the edge of the board. Black enjoys a dominating two-pawn center and can soon activate the bishop pair with a move such as bishop g4, pinning the knight on f3 and threatening to win material with e4. White will struggle to complete development and defend against black's active piece play and impressive center, so this is a line white should avoid. Rather than playing the solid d3, or allowing the center knight fork trick with knight c3, then an active way to defend the e4 pawn is with knight g5. The knight supports the center while piling up the pressure against black's vulnerable f7 pawn. When you're starting out, playing bishop c5 on the third move is an excellent choice, because in that case there would not be a knight on f6, allowing black to play queen takes g5. Knight g5 is a dangerous response against the two knights' defense, but with proper preparation and experience, this is an opening to be respected, but not feared. Knight takes f7 is a serious threat. For extreme thrill seekers with a great memory in the audience, bishop c5 is a speculative choice to explore, known as the Traxler variation, ignoring white's dangerous attack against f7, hoping to generate sufficient counterplay against white's king. A far more reliable as well as popular option is to strike in the center with d5, temporarily blocking the light-squared bishop's pressure against f7. In order to play this variation well, black must be ready to sacrifice a pawn after e takes d5. Knight a5 is the move almost always played at grandmaster level. In order to understand why this offside knight move is so important, let's take a look at black's natural response, knight takes d5. It appears black is doing just fine, but this turns out to be a mistake. Not only can white play the disruptive shot d4, white can unleash the dangerous fried liver attack with knight takes f7, sacrificing a piece after king takes f7. followed by the powerful queen f3 check, attacking the enemy king while adding a second attacker against the pinned knight on d5. If black's king does not defend the knight, then white will simply regain the piece with bishop takes d5, enjoying an excellent position. The only way to defend the knight is by exposing the black king with king e6. The vulnerable black king also blocks the light-squared bishop from actively entering the game. White intensifies the pressure against the pinned knight with knight c3. There are some complicated lines the interested viewer may explore, but the main point to understand is that white has full compensation for the piece, and it is quite difficult for a human to defend black's position. The knight on c6 will need to move in order to defend the d5 knight, which allows white to later play d4, preparing to open up the center and attack the exposed enemy king. White may also decide to castle and play rook e1, when white enjoys a tremendous attack. Rather than defending the threatened knight, it's possible to counterattack white's light-squared bishop with b5. Intending to meet bishop takes b5, with queen takes d5, defending the c6 knight, while also attacking the light-squared bishop and the unprotected pawn on g2. The knight g5 lines are quite complicated for both sides to navigate. In this case, white must shift gears from ultra-aggressive play to suddenly making a subtle positional move, bishop f1. Black's best response is likely knight d4, transposing into a line we're about to examine. Knight takes d5 allows the light-squared bishop to return to the action with the dangerous bishop takes b5, pinning the c6 knight. Protecting the pawn on g2 is important since queen takes d5 allows the strong response knight c3. Since the g2 pawn is protected, black's queen must retreat, allowing bishop takes b5, when white builds a dangerous initiative. b5 is an interesting but speculative choice. A related line is known as the Fritz variation, starting with knight d4. After c3 and b5, the Fritz variation transposes to the earlier b5 line. We'll take a look at the main continuation in a moment, but it's worth noting that knight d4 prepares a deadly trap. Instead of challenging black's knight with c3, it's tempting to play d6, renewing the light-squared bishop's pressure against f7. This does look quite dangerous, but incredibly black can simply ignore this pressure with queen takes d6. White can play the calm d3, or even bishop takes f7 check, provoking sharp complications after king e7. Ideas such as queen c6, attacking the g2 pawn while joining the knight's pressure against c2, as well as evicting the knight with h6 is in the air when black's lead in development should not be underestimated. If white accepts black's invitation to fork the queen and rook with knight takes f7, this allows the deadly response, queen c6, attacking both the light-squared bishop as well as the unprotected g2 pawn. If white grabs the rook with knight takes h8, instead of automatically capturing the bishop, black can play the powerful queen takes g2, attacking the rook on h1. The only way to defend the rook is with rook f1. White is currently up a rook, but this will be short-lived. Bishop g4 is one powerful resource to embarrass white's undeveloped forces, but black may also enjoy the crushing queen e4 check, exposing white's paralyzed king. Queen e2 simply loses the queen to knight takes e2, and trying to defend with bishop e2, pinning the bishop to the king, allows the smothered mate, knight f3, an instructive resource to keep in mind. If black could guarantee such positions every time after knight d4, then the Fritz variation would put the aggressive knight g5 Italian lines out of business. Instead of playing d6, white can challenge black's knight with c3. Knight f5 is a passive response that does not challenge white's position when one path to a comfortable position is castling, preparing to pressure black's e5 pawn with rook e1. Black should continue with the counterattacking shot b5. When white transposes into the earlier b5 lines we examined with the subtle bishop f1, protecting the g2 pawn and preparing to meet knight f5 with bishop takes b5 check. Black's best chance is to counterattack with knight takes d5, capturing a pawn while revealing the queen's pressure against the unprotected knight. White is able to secure a comfortable advantage after the exchanges c takes d4, queen takes g5, bishop takes b5 check. White is happy to exchange bishops if black plays bishop d7, and after king d8, white can secure the king side by castling. White is threatening bishop c6. In the desperate bishop h3, attacking the pinned g2 pawn simply loses material after queen f3. This line is a serious challenge for black to face, securing the Fritz variation status as a sideline. We've already revealed dynamic opportunities for both sides in the two knights defense, and we haven't even skimmed the surface of the main line, knight a5. Moving the knight to safety while attacking white's light-squared bishop, although black's knight should not remain too comfortable on the edge of the board. White's most popular continuation is the forcing bishop b5 check. Blocking the check with bishop d7 is well met by queen e2, supporting the bishop while increasing pressure against black's center. Since black is sacrificing at least a pawn, it's a good policy to maximize active piece play and avoid unnecessary piece exchanges. This is why black's most common reply is the active c6. Gaining another tempo against the bishop and fully committing to a pawn sacrifice after d takes c6. Knight takes c6 allows white to consider trading minor pieces with bishop takes c6, making it more challenging for black to find full compensation for the pawn. So once again, black seeks active counterplay with b takes c6. White has several ways to address the threat against the light-squared bishop. The most direct choice is moving this piece immediately, and there are no shortage of bishop moves available. A tempting, but ultimately misguided choice is bishop a4, maintaining the tension against the weak c6 pawn, but the bishop is misplaced on this diagonal, allowing black to gain the upper hand with h6. One drawback to the aggressive knight g5 is that the knight does not easily find a stable home. Black is prepared to meet knight f3, with e4, gaining more space and placing white's position under serious pressure. Pinning the pawn with queen e2 is well met by bishop e6, when black enjoys excellent piece play and a healthy lead in development. Knight g1 is not exactly an exciting prospect, but if white lunges forward with the tempting knight e5, increasing pressure against the c6 pawn, white will regret this decision after queen d4. Forking the knight and light-squared bishop, white can try to avoid losing material with bishop takes c6 check. But after knight takes c6, knight takes c6. The queen traps white's knight with queen d5, when black will simply win a piece. Instead of playing bishop a4, white's traditional response has been bishop e2, moving the bishop to a modest but more stable square. It's important for black to play energetically, so a good continuation is to first evict the knight from g5 with h6. Although the interested viewer could explore knight h3, white's knight typically returns to the f3 square, when once again black chases the knight and claims more space with e4. White centralizes the knight with knight e5. Bishop c5 is one active idea to explore, but knight e5 also invites black to activate the dark-squared bishop with bishop d6. Attacking the loose knight, white is starting to seriously fall behind in development, so a good response is d4. Rather than wasting more time with the knight, d4 supports this piece and also prepares additional development. Black may be down a pawn, but enjoys a lead in development with active piece play. With this in mind, it's generally advantageous to open up the position as much as possible to maximize piece play, so black captures the pawn with en passant, renewing the threat against the knight, so white retreats this piece with knight takes d3. This is a good moment for both sides to castle. Grandmaster Harakrishna, playing black, intensifies the pressure against white's kingside with queen c7, creating a queen-bishop battery, threatening the h2 pawn. Weakening the light squares with g3 is one option, but his opponent, Grandmaster Zhang, played the more popular h3. The knight on a5 appears misplaced, but it is able to support queenside expansion with c5. Black opens the long light-squared diagonal, which possibly could allow a future bishop b7. This move clears the c6 square in case black needs to retreat the knight. But black's main plan is to use the knight on a5 to help support the space-gaining c4, gaining space and yet another tempo against white's knight. Notice that black is not afraid of bishop f3, attacking the rook on a8, as rook b8 is a healthy move, adding pressure against white's queenside. In the game, white decided to support the c4 square with b3, preventing black from forcing the knight on d3 to move yet again after c4. Black was not discouraged and still advanced with c4, provoking the exchange b takes c4, knight takes c4. Black's offside knight enters the action, and now that Black no longer has a pawn on the c-file, the c2 pawn will become a target to attack. White lags behind in development, so he developed his knight with knight d2. Although Black generally avoids piece exchanges, the game continued with knight takes d2. Bishop takes d2. White's pieces are slowly entering the game, but the exchange of knights has revealed the queen's pressure against the c2 pawn. Black continued to develop actively with bishop f5, adding pressure against the knight and x-raying the c2 pawn. White improves the position of the bishop with bishop f3, gaining a tempo against Black's rook, while also clearing the e-file for White's kingside rook. Black intensified the pressure against c2 with rook a to c8. If White decides to defend the pawn with rook c1, Black may simply focus on completing development with rook f to d8, enjoying strong piece play. It's also possible to dislodge the rook with bishop a3, when Black can capture the c2 pawn when convenient. Black has full compensation for the sacrificed pawn, so White is willing to return the extra pawn in order to focus on healthy development with rook e1. Before capturing the c2 pawn, Grandmaster Harikrishna activated his last piece with rook f to d8. Black's pieces are tremendously active, so White must act cautiously to maintain the balance. In the game, Black soon regained the pawn with queen takes c2, when White should trade queens to enter a manageable endgame. In the actual game, White did not exchange queens, quickly collapsing under Black's active piece play. Rather than playing the traditional bishop e2, modern Grandmaster practice has also considered bishop d3. This move does feel a bit artificial, especially as it blocks the d-pawn. The point is that unlike the bishop e2 lines, when h6 forced White's knight to lose additional time trying to find a useful square, in this case White is prepared to meet h6 with knight e4, enjoying a better position as it limits Black's counterplay. In response to bishop d3, one reliable option for Black is to play knight d5, centralizing the knight while eyeing the f4 square. This move also reveals the queen's pressure against White's knight on g5. If White decides to play knight e4, this can be met by f5. The interested viewer may explore the exotic-looking h4. But another sensible path is to simply play knight f3, adding pressure against e5. So Black can reinforce the center with bishop d6, when White is prepared to castle. Without a bishop on e2, rook e1 is a desirable option to add more pressure against Black's center. In one high-level encounter, Grandmaster Ding Liren played knight f4, attacking White's vulnerable light-squared bishop, if White tries to avoid a compromised structure with bishop e2. This is well met by the surprising shot, knight takes g2. The point is that if White plays king takes g2, this is well met by e4. White should actually allow Black to capture the knight on f3, resulting in excellent attacking chances for Black. Because if White tries to save the knight with a move such as knight e1, White's exposed king will not survive long after queen g5 check. White's position is completely hopeless, as king h1 allows queen f4, with checkmate to follow. Since bishop e2 can quickly backfire, Grandmaster Levon Aronian continued with knight c3, allowing Black to compromise White's structure with knight takes d3, c takes d3. Black is down a pawn, but White is now saddled with doubled, isolated pawns. When Black decided to castle, rook e1 is one sensible choice, and in the game, White decided to play b3, securing the c4 square and preparing to activate the dark-squared bishop. Black's knight remains awkwardly placed on a5, and although rook e8 and bishop a6 are interesting options to explore, Black continued with c5, opening up the c6 square for Black's knight, but also allowing the c5 pawn to become a target for White's pieces, starting with bishop a3. Black continued as planned with knight c6, when Grandmaster Aronian intensified the pressure against c5 with knight e4. White's doubled isolated pawns may prove to be an eyesore, but we should not underestimate White's chances. The doubled pawns allow White to place rooks on c1 and e1, adding pressure against Black's c5 and e5 pawns. In the game, Ding responded with knight b4. Black remains down a pawn, but White's compromised pawn structure provides ample compensation. This imbalanced position provides plenty of chances for both sides to explore, and in this particular Grandmaster encounter, the game eventually fizzled out into a draw. So far, our focus has revolved around White moving the light-squared bishop, But another way to fight for the initiative is queen f3, pinning the c6 pawn to the rook. There are no shortage of interesting options to explore, including rook b8. Defending the pawn with bishop d7, as well as bishop b7 are possible. And another instructive path to consider is bishop e7. Black offers a second pawn, focusing on rapid development, preparing to castle the king. White should not accept the second pawn with bishop takes c6 check. Knight takes c6. Queen takes c6 check. Forking the enemy king and rook looks tempting. This allows us to appreciate black's bishop developing to the e7 square rather than d6, as black can gain a tempo against the queen with bishop d7, revealing the queen's protection of the rook and preparing to respond to queen f3, with kingside castling. In exchange for 2 pawns, black enjoys a serious lead in development, as well as the bishop pair. Black is prepared to play knight g4, followed by grabbing more space with f5, when black enjoys full compensation for the 2 pawns with dangerous counterplay on the king side. Instead of grabbing a second pawn and allowing black a dangerous initiative, a safe and promising alternative is bishop d3. Thanks to the queen's presence on f3, the knight on f6 is pinned to the f7 pawn, preventing the desirable knight d5 for the time being. Black resolves this issue by castling. White fights for the center and focuses on development with knight c3. Adding pressure down the b-file with rook b8 is an interesting option to explore. And black may also consider h6, provoking knight g to e4, when black is able to centralize the knight with knight d5, eyeing the b4 square to harass white's light-squared bishop as well as the queen side. One idea for white is to play knight g3, preparing to invade black's territory with knight f5. This is a complex line that will reward careful study. The 2 knights defense against the Italian opening is a sound, reliable way to create an immediate imbalance in the position. This move does invite the sharp response knight g5, which often results in quick wins for white against inexperienced players. With proper preparation, however, knight g5 is a move to be respected, but not feared. White can also play in a more positional manner with d3, inviting black to transpose into classical lines of the Italian with bishop c5. If you're looking for a way to create early imbalances against the Italian, or want to decide how to handle these positions as white, then you will definitely want to explore the fascinating 2 knights defense.